Hi, this is Bill Janovitz from the band Buffalo Tom, celebrating 20 years of retrospectives on 3SER KC Radio.
No problem.
Growing up for you, when did you first get bitten by the music bug?
Well, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so I didn't have older brothers or sisters to kind of pass that along to me. But I always remember a time, there wasn't a particular moment in my life. It just was kind of growing up with AM radio and my parents being casual, but into music. You know, it was an important part of their lives, but they weren't big record collectors or anything like that. And they certainly weren't rock and rollers per se. They were kind of on the cusp of all that. Kind of the generation that more or less could have gone either way. They could have ended up like 64-year-old Mick Jagger or Tony Bennett, which is, I think, they kind of aired towards the latter.
Yeah.
But just kind of growing up and neighbors, and it was just part of the era in the early 70s. So I inherited some records from neighbors and things like that. But the first album I can really remember going out and buying, I had bought a lot of singles and things like that, but really kind of was buying an actual record was when I was about 12 years old or so. That would have been a Stevie Wonder record.
Okay. Now, you were in bands in your high school and college years. How important do you rate those bands now in terms of how you developed as a musician?
I suppose they're essential, cogs. It's just like growing up in any other way. It's hard to isolate any particular incidents and say, kind of quantify them. But, I kind of was playing Southern rock and Rolling Stones and what else? Neil Young covers when I was probably 13, 14, and that's kind of still what I'm doing now. I just kind of put my own name on them now. So I guess I've gone full circle. But in the interim, I played in college bands that I guess we tended to kind of latch on to the different influences, kind of whatever was most immediate at the time, in high school in particular. But I didn't sing for quite a while. It was really until a singer in high school, and my high school band kind of didn't come back for the summer and went away, that I really took up the mantle and started lead singing. And one thing led to another. I started writing more, and by the time I hooked up with Chris and Tom from Buffalo Tom, I was very used to singing and playing guitar and writing, and so it was kind of based around that.
Was there a blueprint for the sound of Buffalo Tom when you formed it?
Not per se, no. I had kind of been playing more jangle-y, I guess, type things before Buffalo Tom. Very much into bands like REM, not just REM, but there were a lot of regional bands like REM, especially in Boston. Bands like the Neats, who were a really kind of popular Boston band, and I suppose not unlike what was going on in Flying Nun down in New Zealand, kind of very intelligent collegiate pop, and I think, Dinosaur Jr., obviously they were just Dinosaur at the time. They were becoming quite big where we were. They were based, he grew up, Jay Mascis, actually all 3 of them grew up right in the college town, Amherst, Massachusetts, where we were attending university, and they were an immediate influence that everybody pointed to. It was kind of obvious, and but we were very much influenced by things that Dinosaur were influenced as well, and things that were things from our childhood, like I joked about Neil Young, but those things had never really left, even though we had all kind of moved on to newer, more exciting, quote-unquote things. And Mission of Burma from Boston were a big band. But when Buffalo Tom really got together, I think what was foremost in my mind, Dinosaur was there, certainly, but I think ahead of Dinosaur was Husker Du and the Replacements from Minneapolis, and bands that were, because I was very much into the aggression and the kind of loud guitar aspect of a lot of sort of later punk rock, but I wasn't really into hardcore and straight edge and all that kind of stuff. But it was when sort of Husker Du took that and merged it with melody and songwriting and folk tradition, and that stuff really interested me, and that's kind of what really spurred Buffalo Tom on, I think.
Of course, you had Jay Mascis involved in production on the early Buffalo Tom recordings. Mm-hmm. How influential was he in the direction of those early records?
Well, Jay is an interesting guy, and back then he was. If it's possible, I think he was even more enigmatic and taciturn than he is now. But he was very funny, and nobody really saw that part of him. And for us, it was his main role when we first brought Jay in was to be a buffer, because he had gone out and made these crazy-sounding records, I think at that point, 2 albums that really we had never heard those kind of sounds on record. You know, we had heard Husker Du, we had heard Sonic Youth, which was extremely interesting to us as well. But here's a guy that somehow went into the studio and came out with a monstery, hairy sound, and we our experience in the studio to that point had been pretty disheartening. You know, you kind of go in with a big amp and you come out with a puny sound. And, you know, engineers telling you what you can and can't do. And for us to bring in Mascis, the idea was to kind of go in and come out with something that we wanted to do. You know, and engineers be damned. Well, as it turns out, we didn't really need that. We had already kind of started on our own, actually, before we brought in Jay. That first record we did was bits and pieces on our own over the course of a year or so, and we had kind of gotten the word on this great studio, which was just kind of a buzz at that point, called Fort Apache, which turned out to be a real essential part of not just Boston, but American, you know, kind of indie rock in the early 90s. And the guys there were all musicians as well that just happened to figure out how to run a studio. So, and they were all very hip, you know, young guys as well. So nobody there was going to tell you what you couldn't do. In fact, we were usually blowing things apart in the studio. I mean, literally speakers blowing up and things being wired wrong. And it was learning as you go. But Jay was still very good for, you know, and obviously we had the influence of Jay, so the sound was kind of going that way. And Jay was very good with telling you kind of which kind of amplifiers to use and which version of Marshall amplifiers to kind of use for which sound and that kind of stuff.
Now, college radio embraced the band fairly early, but commercial airplay was another hurdle. Was that a source of frustration at the time? Did you think about that much?
No, not at all. In fact, I mean, I try to put things in context for people that, I mean, that wasn't even on the radar, commercial radio rather. You know, our goals were really modest, and there's a book called Our Band Could Be Your Life by Michael Azaroff, which documents this kind of scene from the late 80s into the 90s, and before alternative quote-unquote rock became a commodity, and it was just really about bands like the Minutemen and Replacements and, you know, Sonic Youth, really, and Mission of Burma, and how they kind of came out of the 80s and were just had their own little circuit, really, of clubs and booking agents and vans and, you know, and equipment places and places to sleep in all these different cities, in not just the United States, but eventually into Europe. And we were at the tail end of that, so there was no commercial potential when we started, especially the fact that we were very much in your face with loud guitars and really murky production, and not necessarily good production, just stuff that was very different sounding than what was being played on the radio in the late 80s. I mean, in the United States, it was probably better than it is now, I think.
Yeah.
But it was pretty god-awful. You know, it was Bon Jovi and bands like Bon Jovi and hair bands. And,
yeah.
For us, it was amazing when R.E.M. started to crack through, and when I first heard The Cure on commercial radio in the States, while they had been certainly quite big in England. I don't know if they had sort of cracked it in Australia by the 80s, but in the mid-80s to hear The Cure or R.E.M. and then starting to hear different kinds of things kind of making their way through, that was pretty mind-blowing. So I think by the time Buffalo Tom came around, we were thinking, well, if we get played on college radio, that's great. And we were thrilled with that, and we were lucky to get a headlining gig in Boston. And then when that started to happen, well, each time something was achieved, we kind of looked at the next goal, and then all of a sudden we were on a major label in the United States, and commercial radio was the actual thing to try to go for. And I mean, that's a whole other chapter of shaking hands and kissing babies and trying to get on the radio, which was kind of pretty disheartening, but I won't talk about that at this point.
Yeah. At what stage or what album did the band really come of age for you?
I guess everybody points to Let Me Come Over, and it certainly really makes sense to me looking back. It was our third record. Our first record kind of just really established an overall kind of picture of us, and the second record was Bird Brain, which was more of I think we were still trying to find our feet, and I was writing in a few different kinds of sub-styles of this sort of post-punk kind of stuff. But it was really on Let Me Come Over that we let a lot of our classic influences come through, like, Van Morrison and the Stones, Neil Young, and we didn't worry so much about, kind of a certain scene or being aggressive or anything like that. It was just really, I think, a maturity in the songwriting kind of coming out, and I think it followed from there.
Now, you began recording solo material around a time when the band was starting to get some mainstream exposure. There wasn't a temptation for you to put the solo stuff on hold for a while and spend time capitalising on the momentum the band had got?
Keeping the solo stuff down, you're saying?
Or maybe just putting it on hold and trying to capitalise on the momentum that the band had gained?
Well, we did as much as we could. We felt like to capitalize. I mean, the only thing we really could have done more that we didn't do was spend time on the road, and I can't imagine spending any more time on the road than we did. But there were some bands that didn't have homes. They were just on the road all the time.
Yeah.
That would have. We would have killed each other, I think, if we spent that much time on the road. And we all were very attached to people back home, girlfriends and wives eventually, and we couldn't have done it. So there was time that we had that was just naturally had. I never felt like I put Buffalo Tom on hold until in these last few years that we collectively put Buffalo Tom on hold. But back then it was just an opportunity of we're off the road, we don't have to be making a record right now, and I had some friends who are now in Calexico. Back then they were just kind of sidemen, and it was just an opportunity to kind of do a side project and go out there. And then the other solo records came after Buffalo Tom was specifically on a hiatus.
So where were the band's best markets outside of the States?
Actually, Australia was great for us, and hopefully will continue to be so if we get down there again. It's always been great fun. We did some memorable tours down there with a Superchunk, and it was just a great place to tour for us. Certainly London and all of the UK, really, and big parts of Europe as well, barring, say, France, but doing really well up in the northern countries, and Scandinavia was pretty good, but certainly the Benelux countries were where we were the strongest, most consistent. The Benelux and the UK, and I don't think it's any coincidence that's where our main labels were based. The States was more hit or miss, actually. We did very well in cities that you might predict, like Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle. But once we get down to like Phoenix or parts of Texas outside of Austin, I mean, I think we were like any other band that didn't have an overall MTV or national radio hit. We were more just kind of wherever the word of mouth was the strongest, or college radio was the strongest. That's where we did well.
Yeah. So was Buffalo Tom getting to a stage where you felt you'd taken it as far as you could at that point, and hence the hiatus it seems to be in now?
No, I think people currently think that we were broken up, but we probably would have broken up if we didn't take a hiatus. And it had just got to a point where we were really sick of the whole thing, and we had spent so much energy and physical and mental energy trying to get that last record together, Smitten, because you get to a point where you've put out so many records. For us, it was 5 up until that point. We really wanted to make something different. Each record we tried to kind of do something a little different with, at least. And that record, we hired a full-time keyboard player, and we were messing around with samples and loops, and just kind of trying to break out of the formulas that we had, the ruts. In a sense, we didn't want to keep putting out the same songs. So, and we had kind of gotten very close to signing with one label, and that fell through, and it took another who knows how many months to kind of pull another one together with Polydor. And we signed to Polydor knowing that there was a impending merger with Universal Seagram's, and they kind of offered us the choice to either hold back the record and see what happens, or put it out, knowing that it could just go away really quickly. And we chose the latter, and that's in fact what happened. We spent probably 2 years all told kind of putting this record together, and it just completely fell apart. The 200 bands were dropped. I mean, our record got absolutely no promotion in the States. So it was disheartening, but it wasn't unpredictable either. And we had, prior to signing, or as part of signing the contract, we had a clause, a pretty standard clause, I suppose, but a good one for pay or play, which paid us for, I think, 2 more subsequent records or portions thereof. So that gave us a little bit of financial security to kind of just say, this is a good time. We're having kids at this point. Tom had 2 kids. I had my first on the way. It was a really good time to just step back and say, right, let's just kind of call it a hiatus. But if we want to get back together, we will. But if not, we'll kind of just regroup and just not make any harsh decisions right now. And I think it was good. It was a perfect thing, because we probably would have just said, that was a great career. Let's move on. But at this point, I really, for like probably a year or so after, if somebody had asked me to bet, I would have bet that Buffalo Tom wouldn't get back together. But in fact, we did, and we're putting out some really good music, I think, soon.
It's horrendous. So you think being free to pursue other projects has probably kept you from having to officially split the band?
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't know if it was the specific projects, the ability to do that per se. I think it was really just knowing. That certainly helped. It's hard for me to take out one different aspect. I think it was just really being able to step back from the band. But it's, you get it. I get kind of, I can revert to cliches, but it's, people say, I thought you broke up. And I look back, our last record we haven't put out a record since 97, 98. And it really is it's going to be almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Between records, which they just add up so fast, But life is happening in other ways, so it's amazing that it kind of went by like that. But yeah, the ability to, and the actual doing different projects, maybe cast a certain perspective, or lent a certain perspective to what Buffalo Tom was. So when we got back together, we didn't worry so much about kind of methodology. We just said, all right, let's just kind of throw some songs around and try to write together and see what happens. And I think we've been pretty pleased with the results.
They say the parenthood changes everything. Has it affected the time you spend on your music now?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that and mainly that, I think, but, having to kind of go out and get a day job. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think I was spending too much time on music, because I'm very disciplined. And once I quit my old day job out of college and Buffalo Tom became a full-time career, I looked at it as such. And, sure, there were days where I would just walk around Boston or, take a bike ride for hours and not do anything. It just kind of grist for the mill. There were other days where I just spent 8 hours a day almost just writing or tweaking or putting or recording, and I felt like everything that came into my head was worthy of putting down on tape. And I mean, poor Buffalo Tom, poor Chris and Tom, they just had to weed through tons of just crap just to try to find something that was worth pursuing. And I think now I might be writing as many or hopefully more good numbers, but I don't spend as much time just putting stuff down and trying to put lyrics to every single idea that I have, you know.
Let's talk about some of your other projects. Crown Victoria, tell us all about that one.
Well, you know, unlike my first solo record, which was always conceived as a side project and thus a little bit more experimental, Crown Victoria happened as soon as Buffalo Tom decided to kind of take a break, and that was going to be my new rock band and sort of catch-all for all the projects, you know, that I'd been kind of had in my mind. It was going to be, you know, for any new music I put out. So these were more like A-list songs for me in my mind. But it was taking a long time. I mean, the band came together rather quickly, and I felt really great about the band, but we couldn't really garner up much interest, and we weren't getting knocks on the door from record labels dying to put us out, and it was taking a while to put it all together. The other guys were in other bands as well, so it was hard to really get traction on that project. So while we were working on those, I said, well, I actually have a collection of songs that could probably be just solo acoustic, and that's when I put out a record called Up Here, which was just more guy in the studio for a weekend with maybe one or two friends, but no drums really, and no real bass. So that was a more intimate thing that I put out in probably the late 90s. And then, actually it was 2001, because it was soon after 9/11 that it came out. And then in the meantime, Crown Vic kept going, and I had done a little solo tour or two on my solo on the Up Here record, but Crown Victoria, you know, changed a little bit. We got a new bass player, and it's become its own band to the point where I don't just bring any song to it. I kind of know the songs that this band is going to kind of excel at, and we tend to be a little bit more classic rock, very Stonesy, very sort of R&B. So we're more into sort of a soul kind of thing now than sort of straight rock and roll. But that said, it is still very much rock and roll. But I think we tend more towards the sort of blues and soul, R&B based rock and roll than the kind of more white folky tradition.
And the Bathing Beauties, one we didn't hear too much about down here.
Yeah, no, nothing really happened with that. In fact, Chris Colburn put together a new project that just came out in the States called, I guess it's called Colburn and Mancini. It's Chris Colburn and Hilken Mancini from a band called Fuzzy, and they actually got together after I had gotten together with one of the other voice of Fuzzy, Chris Toppin, and you know, we would all joke that I went to Fuzzy to find a side project, and then he went to Fuzzy to find the other side project. But they ended up getting their record out, and it kind of spurred Chris Toppin and I to kind of pull together these tracks and say, listen, let's finally do something with these. And some of them are the Bathing Beauties, which was Chris Toppin and myself, she's a woman singer who sounds a lot like Emmylou Harris. Actually, she sings on the Crown Victoria record as well as my solo record. And but the other thing, the Bathing Beauties is more of a kind of bar band. We played a lot of countryish stuff, and but Chris and I also took about half of the songs and did them in a more intimate kind of home recording setup as well. And so I have this collection of maybe 12, 13, 14 songs that I just need to get mixed and put out somehow. And if nothing else, I'd put them up on my website for download.
Yep. So when you're sitting down to write songs these days, are you aware of the vehicle that the song is going to be for, or does that become apparent later on?
No, I'm still unsure. Although it depends what the timing is right now. But it's the only projects I really have that are regular at this point are Buffalo Tom or Crown Victoria.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose there are some that are just plain solo acoustic that really I couldn't imagine any band playing, and I don't know what I would do with those. But as far as the rock and roll-y songs, I think it depends more on timing at this point. Though some songs are clearly more Buffalo Tom, and some songs are clearly more Crown Victoria. Like I couldn't imagine Buffalo Tom doing a more straight-up soul or country-based number. Everything with Buffalo Tom is a little bit off-kilter, I think, or it certainly fits a certain slot for Buffalo Toms. But there are many songs that I think could go either way, and that's when it comes down to timing. Like right now, Buffalo Tom has decided that we've got enough songs for the next record. Let's just concentrate on finishing them. So anything I'm writing right now, I imagine falls between the cracks of Buffalo Tom records and would come out with the next Crown Victoria record.
Do you think the songwriter in you has become more to the fore in recent years? Are you focusing more towards the song rather than the sound these days?
Yeah, I think that started early on in Buffalo Tom. As a band, in fact, I don't think just as a singer-songwriter guy, but to be fair to the other guys, I really did start to think of myself that way in kind of probably more of an egotistical way that, Buffalo Tom, sure, we were taking band credit for songwriting, but really it was one guy writing and the other guys helping arrange. But that stuff is all semantics, and it's really hard to, like I said, I think it's hard to quantify who brings what to the table during any particular song. And, some songs I've written and brought to Buffalo Tom, I listened to the original demos, and they could be radically different from the original idea, or they could be, mostly they tend to be just rearrangements of the song that I came up with. I actually shouldn't say mostly. I mean, it's hard to say, and that's kind of the point. And I think, therefore, Buffalo Tom is very much a force in and of itself that's greater than the sum of its parts. But nevertheless, I think I started to really see myself in the. I think I always kind of did actually see myself in the tradition of my primary influences, people like Elvis Costello and Tom Waits and Bob Dylan, and these kind of troubadour dudes, Van Morrison, and that's kind of where I was going, I think, when Buffalo Tom took a break. But I guess I'm just such a part of a band that I really, because I think of even the above guys, Neil Young, Tom Petty, maybe Dylan. Some of these guys were the best with certain bands, the Attractions and Crazy Horse, and the bands really do kind of a true band, a true collaboration will really bring out the best in even a monomaniacal songwriter.
Has the reaction from long-term Buffalo Tom fans been towards the other material you've been doing with Crown Victoria and your solo work and whatever?
Well, the diehards seem to at least know about it and enjoy it, but it's been very quiet. It's such a drop-off from Buffalo Tom. I mean, really, I have a hard enough time getting people to show up to any of my solo projects in Boston or side projects. Even in Boston, where Buffalo Tom does a show and people fly in from literally, we have people from Chicago, from Italy, from people come in for a one-night stand at a 600 or 700 or 800 club capacity club. But when I don't begrudge anybody. I'm 39 now. I don't even go see. I have 4 brothers, and they're all in bands. I rarely go out and see bands anymore. So, I don't blame anybody. But yet, it's just a very quiet little affair anytime I have something solo.
Sure. Now, if the wheels do start turning for Buffalo Tom again, do you foresee a time where you'll have to make a decision which to focus on, that or Crown Victoria or whatever?
Oh no, Buffalo Tom would always take front seat. It's for a variety of reasons. I mean, it's more who I'm identified with, who I identify myself with still, and economically, I suppose, as well, although I can't imagine that's a big concern, but at this point, but it just makes the most sense, and I think even when we were on hiatus, we realized that we'll always be members of Buffalo Tom first to anyone that is even paying attention, and then, anything. It's like you look at some of the biggest bands in the world and their solo projects, and it doesn't matter. John Lennon was always first and foremost a Beatle. Doesn't matter what he put out afterwards.
Yeah.
Not because that's probably going to be the last time I compare myself to John Lennon.
Now, you mentioned you don't get out to see many bands these days. Are you playing live yourself much these days?
Yeah, I wouldn't say much, but it's enough that when I do go play, it's enough to keep me from going to see many other things. Just getting out and going to a club at this point. But I don't really enjoy standing and watching bands at clubs as much as I do going and playing in clubs. I've been hoping to try to get more of a regular thing going, like a residency where it could be any variety of groups playing, either Buffalo Tom popping in or Crown Victoria. But that's one of those things that's on my list of things to do. But yeah, I probably play. It's still only a few times a year out. I think I'm involved in a lot of different projects, but not many that are playing out regularly.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm helping. There's this benefit we do every year in Boston. It's called, Hot Stove Cool Music. And hot stove is a term for the baseball off season when people are, when teams are making trades, and there's all kinds of rumors about trading players. And so every year, in conjunction with the Red Sox, for about the last 5 or 6 years with the Boston Red Sox team, we've had this benefit, which is extremely successful for different charities, where a couple players show up and do silent auctions, and different bands play, and there's like a kind of a mutual love fest, and it's a very Boston identified thing. So I'm involved in that, and that comes in January, so I'm working on that now, and I'm working on there's actually a very famous baseball commentator who is also likens himself to be a rock and roller, so we're helping him put together a record.
Oh, great.
So there's a lot of stuff like that.
And one more thing I wanted to ask you about before I let you go. I noticed you've been involved in a book on the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street album.
Oh, yeah. When I had a baby, my first child, I was home quite a bit, so I was starting to do a little bit more freelance writing, and I got involved with this site, allmusic.com, and I was writing about some of my favorite songs for individual song reviews, and it's something I've always wanted to do, and something I have always done, just kind of writing, and but I didn't want to become a music critic or a rock journalist or any of those things, but yet I wanted to kind of, I think, put down what makes some of these songs great. Some of my favorite songs is more of a fan's perspective, and then as I was doing that, this series came together. Joe Pernice did one, Warren Zanes from the Del Fuegos, and a few different people put together these books for Continuum Publishing, which is a series that they put together called 33 1/3, which are graphically similar books, and a series of books about favorite or classic or even cult favorite records, albums from, really just rock and roll records mostly, but spanning 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. There's one on OK Computer, and then there's one, going all the way back to probably Love's Forever Changes, probably one of the earlier ones. And I contacted the publisher, and I was a friend of Joe Pernice's from college, and I said, I know Joe, and I'd be interested in doing this if you're going to do any more. And he said, yeah, sure. So I put a proposal together for Exile on Main Street, which I thought was probably too obvious a record that either had been chosen, but they hadn't put it together yet. So I really I got that one together and just really enjoyed the whole process. And and it's been a pretty successful little book, actually, I think, and it's just a sort of documents my love affair with the record and the mythology of rock and roll and nostalgia and the Stones and the making of the record and that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. Is there something you'd like to do more of?
Yeah, I definitely want to write more, non-music stuff, but I don't know if I want to write more on specific albums. I do love, like I've been just putting together, I don't know what it would ever become, but I've just been writing little things, I guess it's more memoir fiction. I don't know where the line would be drawn, but anything I write, I can't imagine pop music not playing a big part of it. I guess not unlike somebody like Nick Hornby or somebody like that, where it's writing about something else, but where pop music plays an integral part. But I don't know if I'd want to write on another whole book on some specific pop music.
And just before I let you go, anything else coming up in the new year that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, the Buffalo Tom record is the biggest thing, I think. I just don't know when it will be released. We're planning on going to put the finishing touches, I hope the finishing touches on in January or so. So I suppose it would be out within the next year or so. But that's really the main thing. I don't think there's anything else that's impending.
Fantastic. So we'll look forward to that. And it'd be great to get you down here again, whether it be with Buffalo Tom or Crown Victoria or even just yourself with an acoustic over your shoulder. We'd love to see you back down under again. It'd be great.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I imagine it'll be with Buffalo Tom not too long.
Terrific. We'll look forward to that. Bill, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, John.
It's been great to catch up with you. I'll let you go and enjoy your day.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Good on you. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.